to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity to come together tonight. And Lord, we thank you for those that are here this evening. Lord, we appreciate our village. We love our community. And Lord, we are thankful that we have people that are willing to serve our community in these positions. We pray that just throughout the meeting tonight, you'd give your guidance, your direction, help in decisions to be made, Lord, to be pleasing to you. And we just ask these things in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Going on the roll call.
Bob Valdez,
Here.
Glenn Dusa. Here. James Eisen,
Present.
Mike Gunner. Jerry Hayes. Barbara Henry. Here. Tim Waters.
Present. Going on to the minutes of the March 28th, 2022 meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of March 28th, 2022 as presented.
Support. Moved and supported to approve the regular council meeting, March 28th, 2022. Any questions or statements? If not, you can call the roll, Lisa.
Barb.
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Gwen.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes. Minutes are approved. Presentations and communications. Do we have to call for a public hearing for each one of them?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
Yep. We need a motion for a public hearing on the first.
No, I don't think you need a motion, do you?
Need to go.
A motion to, no, I'm sorry, you don't need a motion to open, you just need to call each one individually and take any public comment.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Motion's later.
Yeah, okay. To approve. I have a public hearing for ordinance amending Blissfield Code section 216-1305, number 9, servicing, and number 10, parking lot landscaping. Hearing nothing from the public, we'll go on to the second one. Ordinance amending Blissfield Code section 216-1304, off-street parking requirements, collective provisions. No comments from the public. Public hearing for ordinance amending Blissfield Code section 216-1326, development requirements.
I have a couple questions. Eric Rogers, I live at 742 South Lane Street. On this ordinance that you're proposing tonight for the development, is this a new ordinance that's coming through? Because I looked through the ordinances this afternoon and I couldn't find that specific number, 216-.1326.
Yes, this is a new section
Okay.
to the ordinance.
All right. Does this apply like to subdivisions or new subdivisions that would be coming in, or even industrial type businesses coming in, or industrial, or what they call them now, like our industrial park that we have, if they added on to that, would that include those types of things too?
So this is a general zoning provision, so it would apply to all zones within the village, so yes.
And this mainly pertains to to trees or anything like that in the road right away or in that area. Is that correct? As I read what I read through? Says street trees on every site involving new development or redevelopment, street trees shall be provided within the road right of way for each 35 feet or fraction thereof of the total road frontage and may be planted in a tree lawn, the area between the sidewalk and the curb or edge of pavement. And the planning commission may waive the requirement of the street trees upon determining that such plantings would be impractical due to inadequate right of way, excessive reduction in sidewalk width, or other factors. That's how the proposed,
Right, so what that is saying is that they being the developer or whoever, they would plant the trees because it's then in the village right away. We would maintain them, and you know, if it needed to be cut down or things like that, but it's just getting them established and going so that that doesn't come back on the village and sets that requirement for new development. So that's not going to require any existing development or property in the village, just from if it's adopted from the effective date forward.
all I had, I just wanted clarification, thank you.
Thank you. Going on to the annual audit for fiscal year 2020-21. Raymond.
Good evening.
You did the presentation.
Okay. So there is a presentation coming up on screen. You would have been provided your audited statements separately, and then a board communication letter. But the presentation before you is a summary of both of those documents. I'm happy to answer anything in the details, but hopefully everything in this presentation should cover your questions on the audit and on the board communication. So if you want to turn it to slide 2, just going to quickly talk about the team members that were part of the audit team this year. We do have those board communications that I just spoke to that are in that separate letter. We'll talk about some financial results. We will also go over some upcoming accounting pronouncements that may or may not have effect on your future financial statements, and then obviously open up for questions, but feel free as I'm going through this, if you have questions, I can stop and answer those as we go through. So next slide. So my name is Daniel Clark. I'm the principal on your audit. I believe this is my 4th year working with you folks. Tracy Kendall was the senior manager this year, and then we had Zach Moore as the staff person that was out in the field with me as well. All right, moving on to the board communications. So first and foremost, we were able to issue an unmodified or a clean opinion on your September 30th, 2021 financial statements. Those were issued, I believe, March 24th. So those were issued in time for your March 31st deadline, which is 6 months after your year end. So you were able to comply with the treasurer's requirements there. Number 2, we are asked to communicate any new accounting pronouncements that had any effect on your financials this year, and there were none. So there were no changes to how things were presented last year this year. We're also asked, number 3, to assess accounting estimates, those things such as depreciation expense, accrued compensated absences, and your inputs that go into measuring your pension liability. And we assess those and deem those all to be reasonable. We're also asked to let you know if there were any difficulties, and there were no difficulties. And when I mean that is anything we asked for, any questions that we asked, Danielle and Lisa and Brandon were all very helpful, answered our questions, provided us all the information that we needed. So we appreciate the work of the village there. Number 5, we did have a couple of what we would consider material misstatements. Those related to adjustments to some property tax items, some depreciation and accumulated depreciation. And then probably the largest entry that we made related to accounts payable in your construction and process, which was a late invoice that had come in related to your sewer project. It was about a $1.3 million invoice that came in after year end, but it related to work prior to year end. So that needed to be booked back as an expense as of year end. So number 6, anytime we have a material adjustment, we have to have a material weakness. Those two go hand in hand. So there was a material weakness issued on the financial statement adjustments. We also, which is a repeat from last year, if we are heavily involved in the preparation of your external financial statements, which is very common in an entity of your size. We have to also do a material weakness because that's obviously the responsibility of management, but often in villages of your size, that is outsourced to your accountant just for a cost benefit purpose there. And then new this year, you did have what's called a single audit. So anytime you receive more than $750,000 in federal expenditures that you expend in one given year, we have to do a separate single audit. And that's a specific audit related to your federal dollars. So you had about 2.2 million in federal dollars that came through the loan for your sewer project, and that all qualified as federal dollars. So there are some requirements that when you do have a single audit and do receive significant federal dollars, there are certain policies that have to be in place. Often, this is a very common first year finding for an entity that's never had a single audit before, because obviously they don't necessarily anticipate getting these large funds in enough advance notice to actually have these policies in place. So we recommend that there are 5 policies that need to be written, and they might already be being worked on that the federal guidelines recommend that you have in place. And those things relate to payments, procurement, unallowable cost, your compensation of employee cost, if there are any related to your grants, and then any travel costs. So that's outlined in the actual finding. And then there were a couple of other matters that were noted if you look at the board communication letter. So these were not significant enough to put in your actual audit report, but there was one related to missing approval on one of the items that we tested for the single audit. And come to find out, this was a result of the transition of your new village administrator. So there was a bit of a overlap in which one of the expenditures, not that it wasn't allowable, it just didn't have the actual signature on it. So we just noted that as, hey, moving forward, make sure, especially when there's a transition, that anything that hadn't been approved officially via signature gets signed appropriately. And then there was one also related to the procurement or the bid documents for your large water sewer project. Federal guidelines require that you have certain language on there related to not using vendors that either are suspended or debarred. That's specifically in the federal guidelines. The vendors that you did use were not, but there was no evidence that that was double checked. So there's a list online the federal government maintains that all vendors that are qualified under either suspended or debarred are on there. So you obviously go on there, you look, make sure the vendor you're using isn't on there, and you're good to go.
Do you think some of that, Daniel, is just simply because it's been the first time for?
Oh, yeah, certainly.
All this.
Yeah, these are very common findings for a first year.
For first year, as
Single
well
audit.
as for a project like the wastewater treatment plant. So this is, I mean, it's a project, it's not a normal project, so therefore there are these things.
Yep. Yeah, I would say that's accurate. Again, if there are continued needs for federal grants that you expect to spend, which at this point, I think you still have about $6 million yet to be spent on that grant, I would make sure moving forward that those things get addressed, because obviously we will have to do a single audit for you for fiscal year 22. So those same things are going to be looked at. So we just recommend those things get buttoned up before we come back and do fiscal year 22's audit. So
I'm sure you get those buttoned up, right?
Yes.
yes.
Hopefully we don't need any new vendors, but I am working on the policy.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a very easy thing to fix too. I mean, that's just more of a documentation that you actually check the website. So
And that's probably something, I mean, I just don't do it every day. It's not an everyday task and.
correct.
Right, yeah.
Yep. So any I guess any questions on that before I move on to number 7? Okay. So also communicated in the board letter, there was indication that fraud may have occurred, and why I say may is because this is still under investigation. It's still with the attorney and the prosecutor's office, is my understanding. So we had to make note of that in the board communication letter, and that's just still pending further review.
Is that something you found or somebody notified you?
So this was brought to our attention as part of the annual audit process. We do fraud inquiries. We ask various individuals in the organization about specific fraud things, and if they feel like there's something that they need to share, then that's brought to our attention. And that's how it was brought to our attention.
When you say organization, who is that?
Meaning,
You said an organization brought it to your attention.
No, meaning we ask specific people in your organization. So we
This
usually,
console,
we usually talk to one person on council, but the person that brought it to our attention was not on council. It was somebody on staff.
And was that in the year 21, 22, you were saying here, Daniel?
No, this was brought to our attention, I believe, at the end of 2019. And this has just been ongoing investigation. There has been no finalization of the actual forensic.
Right, so this is from the original.
Yeah, in fact, in the board communication letter, it specifically states that this is this year.
This year, that's what I want to clarify.
Correct,
Okay.
yes, yes. So it did not occur this year, but the time period that it did, it has not been resolved. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So this year, there were no new fraud allegations that were brought.
But
to
you still
attention.
have to state it as part of our communication.
Yes, because it's not resolved, correct.
Gotcha.
And the controls that I believe that were a finding last year that needed to make sure that something like that didn't occur again had been put in place. So we obviously looked at those controls and make sure that those were operating effectively.
just for clarification, so you had one staff member and one council member mention this?
That was how it was brought to our attention first, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
But they interviewed him more than one staff member for the fraud portion.
Yeah, I think we usually pick 4 or 5 different staff and then we always talk to at least one person on council. And that changes annually because obviously we need some sort of unpredictability of that questionnaire. So,
So every year you talk to someone on council?
yes, yep.
Okay,
And
and
it's,
so
and it's usually the board president. Yeah, but it doesn't have to be.
it doesn't have to, okay.
Yeah, and typically we talk to somebody on the council just to let us know, is there anything going on that we need to be aware of as we do the audit?
So what was the year that this initially came to be, 2019?
I believe, yes.
Okay, so 2019.
It was December 2019 that
A
was brought
staff
to,
member came to you,
yes.
completed the paperwork that was necessary or whatever. it
Yeah,
is.
because so when we gave them the questionnaire, they weren't quite sure how to answer it. That's when that was brought to the council's attention. And then both individuals brought it to our attention.
Gotcha, and then a council person was talking, you talked to a council person, I'm guessing in 2020,
It was the very first part of 2020.
and then also somebody in 21, which is where this audit is from 21.
Yes, correct.
Gotcha.
Sorry if that's a little,
No,
Confusing.
I'm with Tim, I want to make sure I understood.
Yeah, I just want to make sure the staff member brought it to you out of suspicion or facts.
well, that's what's being determined.
But there was a questionnaire that the person had to complete, correct? I think that Tim wasn't on the board when that all happened. That's why he's asking for the clarifications.
Gotcha. Yeah, so there's a question on there that says, are you aware of any real or expected fraud? So it could be either suspected or they actually knew something. And that's where they answered yes.
And that was done in 2019.
That was actually first part of your fiscal year 2020 for fiscal year 19,
Right.
because you have a September year end. Yeah.
Thanks, Daniel.
You're welcome. Anything else on that? Okay. So next slide, as I stated, you did have a single audit this year for the first time, I believe, the village has ever had one. Again, that's anytime you expend more than 750,000 in a given year. You did spend about 2.2 million in the water and waste disposal system for rural communities. It's federal number 10760. So I believe the total grant or the loan amount is going to be about couple $8 million. So of that $8 million, you spent about 2.2 in fiscal year 21. So we do issue a separate opinion on the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. We were able to issue an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion. We also issued 2 separate reports, one on controls over financial reporting and one on compliance. And that's where we have to add those findings in that I already spoke to you about. So the material adjustment and the preparation of your financials is a financial statement finding. And then the one that you didn't have policies is a compliance finding. So those 3 findings showed up on those 2 different reports.
Do we need to mention or talk about the the debt elimination plan?
That's something I can work with you afterwards, probably.
Okay.
So, yeah, I can just briefly, so as a part of, adding on that invoice that we had found after the fact, so it was an AP invoice, it actually took one of your funds into a deficit position. And it's only a temporary thing, it was a timing thing, because you hadn't yet gotten the draw. So, I think it was a 1.3 million, well, that was enough to put, your water sewer funds into a deficit position. So the state looks at that and says, well, you need to file a deficit elimination plan. Well, yours is strictly, it's a timing thing. As soon as the funds were drawn, which they may have been already, now you're out of the deficit. So you will have to, as council, pass a deficit elimination plan, send that to comply with their requirements, stating just that very fact. So I'm gonna get Danielle a draft version of one, because I don't know if you've had to do one.
I've never had to
past.
do one, no, but that'll be, I guess, just wanted to mention it, because you guys will see that. And it looks, and sounds, I think, terrifying, because you're like, what, a deficit, $1.2 million,
Yeah.
but it's just because of the way we receive the bills go out and we receive that money from USDA, so it was fixed within days, or, I mean, really, like, it just on paper looks like it
That's
was
a timing.
later.
Yeah,
But it has to be addressed this way.
yes, unfortunately, yeah, there has to be a plan that's filed.
Yeah, I didn't want you guys to feel like we actually have this deficit out there.
Right.
That's not addressed or taken care of.
Yep,
Thank you.
you're welcome. All right, so I will move on to the financial statement section here quickly. So this is just a snapshot of your balance sheet at the end of September 30th of 2021 in comparison to September 30th of 2020. So you had about $24 million in assets compared to last year about 18.5. So a significant increase of about $5.3 million in assets, which is large. Probably the two biggest reasons here is your cash went up about 2.2 million. Most of that is a result of the increased rates that you're charging in your water sewer. You had about a 1.5 million increase in cash in your water sewer funds. And then your general fund actually had a net income this year. So it had about $450,000 net income. So both of those combined equated to your increase in cash. And then that net capital assets went up about 2.8 million. And that's a direct result of those loan proceeds that you received from the U.S. Department of Ag related to the sewer project. So all that gets to be added on as a capital asset. So you had about 3.3 million in additions to your business type activity and about 190,000 in your governmental activities. And then that's obviously netted with your annual depreciation. And I think you have about $400,000 or $500,000 in annual depreciation. So that's what caused the swing on asset side. The next slide talks about your liabilities. So that also went up. So at the end of the year, you had 9.4 million in liabilities compared to 6.1 last year. So your liabilities also went up significantly, about $3.3 million. Most of that are the two things we've already spoke about, that your accounts payable went up about 1.4 million. That's a direct result of that invoice that came in right after year end that we had to accrue back. And then your long-term debt increased 1.6 million. Most of that is a result of the new debt that you're taking on from the U.S. Department of Ag, netted with your principal payments, and you had about 500,000 in annual principal payments on your current debt. So that netted to about 1.6. Next slide. So this is just a snapshot of your equity or your net position, as we call it in government lingo. You have three different buckets. 81% relates to your capital assets, 11% relates to your restricted, and 8% is unrestricted. And then the next slide just shows that graphically over the last 4 years. So your biggest bucket obviously is your investment in capital assets. That went up to 11.6 million, again, related to that significant investment in your sewer project. That middle line is your restricted. That has remained very flat over the last couple of years. That's just dollars that you receive for specific purposes, but at year end you haven't yet spent on those. And then that bottom line, your unrestricted dollars went from about 300,000 up to a significant increase of 1.2. That's a result of that improvement in your general fund, as well as the increased water sewer rates that has built on net position of those funds. And then I just wanted to talk briefly about your net pension liability. I know this is always something that boards like to see. So this is a graphical representation of the last 4 years of what your pension has done. In 2021, you had total pension liability of 5.1 million, but you had obviously assets and investments that go against that. So you had about 4.4 million in investments. So a net pension liability of about $750,000 at the end of the year. And that has gone up a little bit over the last couple of years, but not significantly enough to make note of it. Obviously, things are costing more, so the liability is going up, but then your investments are also increasing as investments increase as well. And then the next slide just shows your funding percentage over the last 4 years. A very healthy funding percentage. A lot of organizations would love to see this percentage this high. So you're currently at about 85% funded, which is extremely healthy. I know that's fluctuated over the last couple of years, but has remained relatively the same. And then next slide here. So this is a snapshot of your revenue and expenses for all funds. You'll see you had 6.5 million in revenue at the end of fiscal year 21 with expenses of 4.5. So you had a net income of all funds of 1.9 million. Most of this relates to those increased water sewer rates. And then the next slide is just a snapshot of your major revenue sources. So that top line is your property taxes. Has fluctuated up and down a little bit. So this year you get about 1.5 million in property taxes. That middle line is your state revenue. So that went from 970,000 to 1.1. So that continues to increase. And then those bottom two lines are just your fees and your charges for services, and no real significant changes noted there. And then we'll talk just briefly about your general fund. So you'll see in 2021, we had 2.2 million in general fund revenue compared to 1.7 in general fund expenditures. So you had that net that I spoke to about of about 453,000. So most of that relates to, I know you had a pickup of state revenue of 100,000. And I know that there were certain property taxes that are now hitting general fund instead of municipal streets fund. So last year, property taxes related to that specifically were about 27,000. And now this year, 300 some thousand are hitting the general fund. So that's why you're seeing a significant pop in the total revenue for your general fund. And the next slide is your general fund coverage ratio. So this just shows you how many months of expenses that you have in your fund balance. So this year it actually went up significantly. So in years past, you've had about four months or 3 months last year in fund expenditures. And this year you're closing in just under 6 months. So that has improved over the last year. Most of that relates to just that property tax that originally was in the municipal street funds is now hitting your general fund.
And Daniel, do you have a recommendation on where we should be there? Over 3 months?
So yeah, the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, always recommends anywhere no lower than 3. And really, sometimes they say no lower than 4, because potentially you could run into cash flow problems at that point. It's not saying you will, but anything under that, then you're dealing with timing of payroll potentially, and when funds are coming in and funds are going out. So I think in years past, you've kind of been right on the line there. So it's good to see that this number has popped up, but the story will tell whether you can keep it at that level or if that's going to come back down now that. But yeah, I would say no less than 3 or 4 months. So yeah. And then we'll talk about your water sewer fund. So as I've been speaking to, you had a rate increase in 2021. You had 3.6 million in water sewer revenue, about $1 million more than last year, about 2.7. And then the next couple slides are just talking about your cash balance for your water sewer fund. Often we just like to point out that having a healthy cash balance in those funds, obviously there's a lot of capital going out of there. There's debt payments. So in years past, you really had a very lean cash balance in those funds. This year, as you will see there, Net cash flow increased significantly, about 1.5 million. Operating cash flow on the next slide went up about 3 million, and then on the next slide, your cash balance is now sitting at about $1.6 million compared to about $100,000 last year. So that has significantly increased, which is positive news. And then the only thing I left is just upcoming accounting pronouncements. There's quite a few here. Most of these will have little to no impact. As you'll see, I put an NA next to the ones. The only one that may is the leases, and that's if the village has any significant leases out there, which I don't think they do, but that's one that we're working with our clients to make sure that they're properly reporting leases, which is a little different than they used to be. It used to be certain leases could be operating leases, or what we would say are just expenses incurred. Now there's no such thing as that. All your leases have to come on your balance sheet as actual liability over the whole term. But again, I don't think the village has anything significant that's gonna change how that's reported. So I know that was a lot of information thrown at you. Any questions I can respond to?
Would it be oversimplifying to say that we are moving in a positive direction?
Yes, so all of what I just said is that the village looks like they're in a healthy spot. They've improved their coverage ratio, which is great. They've improved the cash position in the water sewer fund. They had a net income in the general fund this year. So all those point to yes, that the village seems to be in a very solid footing. So I would recommend continuing it in that trajectory. So,
Best intentions.
yes.
Any other questions for Dan?
I don't have a question, but I do just want to take a minute to thank Daniel and his team, because as council knows, we've had a lot of changes this last year, and we threw tons of things their way. And with it being my first audit here, we learned a lot of things. We're going through the chart of account conversion. I mean, just a lot of little weird nuances that they helped us through. So I just wanted to thank you and your team.
So we appreciate it. Yes. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you. Moving on to the agenda.
Can we add the Lenawee County Commissioner letter for ARPA funds under presentations and communications?
Okay,
And you guys should have a paper copy of that in front of you.
This paper came about, you guys, from our meeting last week that we had on Monday regarding the ARPA funds, if you will. And so essentially I had, so that I would do it. So I went ahead and I came up with a letter for us. Dear Lenawee County Commissioners, thank you very much for your service to the residents of Lenawee County and for your reevaluation on how to spend the $19.5 million the county has been allocated as part of the American Rescue Plan Act to better represent the county's needs. Villages and cities throughout the county are given the tremendous task of upgrading buildings, water treatment systems, and wastewater treatments, and other infrastructures on very limited funds. While not glamorous, these basic requirements are necessary to provide a quality standard of life for our residents. Blissfield Village Council trustees are discouraged to hear that a proposal of $10 million of the ARPA funds, which are designated for all of Lenawee County, have a proposed allocation for the Phoenix project. This allocation of the funds would not be distributed throughout the county as a whole, and while the county may not be required to distribute the funds to other entities within the county, it seems the funds would be better utilized if allocated in such a way to have the greatest impact on the county in its entirety. We are urging you to consider the needs of our county as a whole and would encourage you to distribute the ARPA funds impartially and equitably. We are not expecting all of the Village of Blissfield's requests to be granted, but please consider the benefits of the collective group of the citizens in Lenawee County. Please consider sharing the criteria being used to evaluate the request from the applicants requesting to receive a monetary award from the ARPA funds, such as a set scale, rating based on percentage of population, and or return on investment. We, of course, would hope that infrastructure would be a top priority. Research has found that water and sewer infrastructure investments generally result in a more productive economy, which typically means higher wages and a better quality of life. Your task in balancing the many needs of Lenawee County is a difficult one, but we believe that investing in the entirety of our county will help ensure a strong, vibrant district. We sincerely thank you for your time and consideration. My name is just on there simply as the author, but I would hope that as a group, that I think that was our impression, because I wrote the bulk of the letter, Danielle tweaked it, added in some things, deleted some things. I would hope that this would be something that we as a council would feel comfortable doing. I certainly don't want to make anybody do it something that they don't want to do, but that was our impression. Would you agree with that, Danielle?
Yes.
So I don't know if you guys have any comments about this, if there's something that you might recommend as a change. I know you're seeing it, you know, late as far as, I mean, we don't have to get this out tomorrow, but it was something that,
No, I think if
You know.
we're gonna put on behalf of the governing body, it should be unanimous, and if that's the case, I'd be more than willing to add my signature.
do you want our
I
signatures or
hope everybody else would
just-
as well.
Village of Blissfield, or how would you suggest?
I think that's completely up to you guys, how you want to do that. I put the Gwen on behalf, just
As an author.
kind of, yeah, just to show that you were the one that wrote it, but it's up to you guys.
I don't have a preference of how you guys want to.
I mean, we can print the letter on letterhead, and any council member that chooses to sign that can do so by a certain time, and we'll just have each of you sign, and then we can mail it to them or provide it, or again, up to you, but that might be an option.
I think that would be,
Yeah, I think that sends more of a message.
For each person signing individually. Would it be possible to have us print that tonight before we leave, just since we're all here now with that? And then,
we're not,
well, I mean, but I know the other two aren't, but getting just two people versus all seven of us signing at one time might be a little easier,
Yeah, I can do that after the
if
meeting.
that would work for you guys, just to, if you want to, you certainly don't have to.
And I see most of you regularly, so if we just say this week, by end of the day on Friday,
If you'd rather do that, we can do that too.
we can do that and just. And I can print it after too, for anybody that needs it, but that way we'll give the other two an opportunity as well.
just wanted to thank Gwen and Danielle for doing that. Sounds really good.
You're welcome.
It was all Gwen, but thank you.
Well, no, it was a team effort. I believe it was. Thank
We're
you.
going on to the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Support?
Moved and supported to approve the agenda as presented. Any additions or questions? If not, you can call the roll, Lisa.
James,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Gwen,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes. Agenda approved. Public comment. Items on the agenda. You state your name and your address.
Again, Eric Rogers at 742 South Lane Street. My question or comments tonight are in reference to item number 8 on page 5 of your packet, which is the resolution approving fiscal year 2021-22 budget amendment number 2 for trash removal service at the River Raisin Festival of Blissfield, Village of Blissfield, Michigan. As it reads, this is basically an additional $2,500 that would be allocated for the trash removal services for the festival. I guess this goes back a number of years, quite a long time ago, and I don't want to date myself, but it goes back about 25 years to when the festival started. My dad was on the council at the time, and then one of his questions was why does the Village of Blissfield pay for the trash pickup for the festival? And to this day, I believe that we still have been doing that, according to what I've read tonight. And this is for an additional $2,500 to help with that. I'm not sure what our costs have been over the years or what our costs were last year to pay for that. I think it was a roll-off dumpster down at the DPW, if I'm correct, if I remember correctly. But I personally do not feel that this is a responsibility of the village of Blissfield to provide trash services for an entity that uses our park to bring a lot of people into town. I get that part of it. But I personally feel, and I'm not sure if other people feel about it, and this may not be popular, but I don't think it's something the village of Blissfield should be paying for in support of the festival. It's my opinion. I don't know if is this because of an increase that has been foreseen because of everything else that's gone up? Do you know?
So, just to clarify for you, currently within the budget, there's $0 budgeted for trash removal. And this is something that during the budget process, I had asked council to hold off on. So until I could do some additional research or investigating, because last year there was some things that were brought up with a potential contract and if the Boy Scouts continued. So I had asked them to approve the budget with nothing funded for this. And then this is now coming back. So it's not an additional, it is an additional, but I'm not on top of any existing monies within the budget.
So previous to this, we've not budgeted money in our annual budget to allow for that service to.
Correct. So the 2,500 is the same fee that the Boy Scouts have been paid at least for, they didn't do it last year, but the 2 years prior, it's the same amount. At least, it may be more than that, but I could not confirm that.
So, and I know Danielle, you've only been here almost a year now, but is this historically an expense that the village has incurred over the past 20 years or more?
Yes, it is.
So it's been a lot over the time.
Yes, it has historically been paid by the village for the trash removal services.
But was not in the budget, not a
It's not
budgeted item.
Right, correct,
Okay.
in this current budget, and that's what spurs the budget amendment, because it is an appropriation that council would have to approve that amendment to include that.
And I understand that. I think that's appropriate to do that, so that at least it's in the budget so that everybody can see it. But I still stand by what I said, that I don't think it's something that the village should have to incur cost on and spread that money amongst all the taxpayers of the village to support the festival. I think we support the festival by going down there, people going down there and spending money and having a good time and everything else that goes on. I don't think it should cost the village of Blissfield a dime to put that on. That's just my opinion. You can like it or not, but that's where I stand.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And that includes the expenses of our police department and DPW workers as well. I don't think I'm sorry, I don't know if my time's up or not. And I get on a roll sometimes, but I don't think that we have fully allowed or accounted for all the monies that are spent surrounding the festival. And I don't know, just my own opinion, I don't know if it benefits our village to have that here. But that's just me.
All right, thank you again. You're
Thank you.
going on to unfinished
Sure is
business.
a good time though.
Oh, I'm sure it is. And to be honest with you, I haven't been down there in about 3 or 4 years, outside of COVID. I've driven by, obviously, but I don't have to participate.
We're moving on to unfinished business. Approve the Parks and Rec Program Coordinator position. Danielle's come up with a job description draft.
So, this is similar to what you have seen before. There were some amendments to the job description to include, be more clear about the aquatic center. So I incorporated those changes. And then at the committee of the whole meeting, we also talked about a scorecard, if you will, or kind of measures for success, which has been included in the job description. I did share this with you guys, and I shared it with Eric May as well, just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. And I did not receive comments, but it is of course open for change if you would like to. So this has been something we talked about at a council meeting and then committee of the whole. I am recommending at this time that we move forward with the restructure in this new position. We do need to post that job. You guys, I'm recommending we do an internal, external posting together, and just kind of give some background, so, because it's been a little bit, that's the same recommendation I made when we did the wastewater treatment plant posting. At that time, you guys as council did make the motion to post internally only, just as a refresher, but one, the job needs to be posted some way. How we do that is up to the council. And I guess too, so you guys know, the reason I'm recommending both is because, one, I do want to see our employees promoted internally, especially if they're a good fit and they're qualified to do the job. But I do also want to make sure that the reason I say both is I want to make sure the village as a whole is getting the best applicant that's going to be a team player and help us move this forward into what our goals and objectives are for the position. So I'm not saying that an internal applicant can't do that, but it saves us time and money just to do one posting and make sure that we're moving forward in the best possible way. But if you have questions, I would be more than happy to answer them. Eric is umping tonight for the Little League, so he's not here, but he does know what my recommendation is, and again, has been provided this information.
A couple comments, if I may, Danielle. I appreciate the scorecard that you have on here. My only question would be the 25% or more increase for the participants. I think that 25% might be a little challenging, depending on what the program is. So that's why I just kind of question it 25%. For additional programs, I guess, were you looking at this as this person is hired here in 22, is this as a look as a 22-23 goal? This wouldn't be a 25% increase each year. This is just for this upcoming year. For clarification on it, does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yes.
Okay.
So
what were your thoughts about the 25% increase?
yeah, I actually changed that several times.
Did you? Okay.
So we had we looked at and I don't have the numbers in front of me, I apologize, but we had looked at what the participants were,
Yes.
but we didn't want to put a number because they fluctuate based on programs. So cheerleading, I think, had like 17.
It remained the same, right? Pretty much.
But then soccer has 100. So it wouldn't be fair to say that we were gonna have 10 more people when 10 for cheerleading is different. So the 25% is meant to be across all programs. So we're not saying a 25% per program, correct? So that could also be a 25% increase by adding a new program and getting those participants. So that, and again, what we did is we took what that number was and what would that be like in the future. I can tell you honestly, we met that by doing volleyball, adult co-ed volleyball at the school. We've increased 25% from last year to this year.
And
We've actually exceeded that.
Yes.
keep in mind the scorecard or the target on the scorecard, if it's not realized, then you have a focused discussion as to why. It's not cause or termination,
Correct.
it's simply trying to figure out why you couldn't, and at that point, maybe you realize the target is set too high, because you'll get saturation at some point, and you'll have to adjust your target rates.
Well, that's why I thought it was 25% per.
The one thing I would like to
Program.
see on it is retainage. How many people come back year after year, season after season, because that number tells us we're doing a good job offering our programs until they either age out or move. So if we have retained year after year, that shows that we're running good programs, good value added programs.
So I do agree with that. My concern with that at this point is the tracking of that. So right now, when you register or sign up for a recreation program, you do a paper form. And then we do all the schedules based on that. We currently own a program that we purchased for the aquatic center that would allow us to track all of that and do reporting. Until we get this position filled that can build and expand off of the program we already have, I think that we can add that as a goal, but I think there needs to be a very clear understanding that measuring that goal without that program would be extremely time consuming and probably not realistic. And not to say we shouldn't add it, I do want to be clear that that one will be a hard one to measure for a little bit.
I know you sent out that data a little bit ago regarding the numbers and where they've gone from year to year kind of a thing. So I was just trying to see if I could find it quickly. I'm not.
Yeah, I should have printed that for the meeting. And I did for the Parks and Recreation Board, I actually did the same thing for the DDA. We, every month when they look at their year-to-date budget, they're getting a year-to-date event or program summary that's listing and breaking it out to see where we're having our successes and maybe which programs are not. So it lists the program, what are revenues, expenditures, and then our net position based off of that, and then our number of participants. So we can be able to look back over the last year and we can see, okay, volleyball did really good, but maybe, I don't know, whatever swim lessons didn't. And I'm throwing out random things, by the way. So I'm not saying that won't do good. So where you can kind of compare and see where do we need to put more focus or effort, and maybe where are we just kind of spinning our wheels and don't have much traction. And hopefully that will help in the future when we're looking at that development and growth too.
The only other thing I'll say is I just fear if we post this job externally, we alienate our internal candidate, which he's done such a good job for the years he's been in position. And certainly has a passion for youth sports and programming and wants to see this be a well-run position, so.
I understand where you're coming from, but I'm gonna just make a brief comment. When Heather came on board as the, for the extra stipend for the pool, what I thought was just gonna be the pool only. And Heather being Heather, went ahead and she started the softball program. She did the Christmas trees, and then she started the volleyball program. Those were 3 programs that have been in the trenches, for lack of better words, that have been being discussed for a number of years by our current Parks and Rec person. When Heather came on board, I'm not saying they were perfect, there were probably some glitches, but at the same token, programs have taken off. And during the year of COVID, when there were no activities per se, that would have been a really good time to maybe sit down and come up with a game plan of these are the programs that I would like to do, and then put some footing behind them. And that did not happen. And that's where my concern is, to be quite honest.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, and I did do some computations with Eric, and I think for the amount of hours he was putting in, his hourly rate, which was a prescribed rate, somewhere in the teens, was actually down in the single digits. Because the amount of additional hours he put in to getting these things and working them. So I think at some point he was maxed out. And extra dollars towards it, buying more hours from him, who knows what and he was fairly integral about working with Heather to get those programs going. So he's got a lot of knowledge,
How much
working knowledge.
assistance he gave with the softball. And I don't believe there's a lot of participation from him for the volleyball. And that's where I'm coming from. And the other thing that I'm gonna suggest is for, dang it, it's just something else I was gonna talk about. I apologize, James, there's something else I was gonna make a comment about. The time for, oh, I know what it was. Well, we had a Parks and Rec meeting here last Tuesday, and I found it very interesting. So this is another part of my perspective that I have. I apologize, what is Dwayne's last name?
Bargain.
Thank you. He's on the Parks and Rec committee. He has gone ahead and there was some discussion the month prior about the volleyball program continuing from the high school coming out here now to the sand volleyball courts. And Dwayne took that upon himself, and he put things out there on Facebook, Village of Blissfield, I don't know, or with Holly Brunke's Butz's thing, Blissfield Now, whatever.
Blissfield today.
I would say Blissfield Now, it's Blissfield Today. Anyhow, Dwayne went ahead and he took the ball and he went with it. And right now, he's the one that's organizing that event. And I'm glad that Dwayne's doing that. But I would have thought if somebody really wanted to have this particular position, that person might have done something more with it than what he is.
Okay. No, I hear what you're saying.
I'm sorry, I don't relish what I'm sharing with you.
Sure.
But I'm just sharing, those were the observations that were made at the Parks and Rec meeting.
All right. Cool. I'll just vote on a motion that's asked for then. I will make it.
So I guess, again, I just want to add that it would be my intention always that if we have a qualified applicant that meets the requirements and is able to do the job, that they be promoted within. Because I do think that it's very important that we grow our people and that we give them a career path. I would say most employees, not all, want some kind of growth. They want to see where they're going to be in the future. So I do support that. I also don't want to shortchange the village. I want to make sure that we're getting the best qualified position or person for that position. We have 26 full-time employees. Of those 26, most of them are where they want to be. You know, our police want to be in the police department, our DPW, et cetera. So it gives us a very limited scope of potential applicants. And that's why I'm recommending to do both. So I do want to be clear that it is my goal when they're the best suited, that internal, they should, to me, jump if they're meeting those criteria to the top because they're internal. But it gives us that ability that maybe they're, you know, if for some reason they can't meet that we've not kind of wasted our time and their time, and then have to repost it and go through that whole process again. And honestly, this is why I made that recommendation before. Any future jobs, regardless of what you guys do today, unless some crazy thing changes, that will probably always be my recommendation. And it's, again, nothing against the employees at all, because we do have good employees with the village. And I don't want to alienate them. I do not want them to feel like they have no room for growth.
Is Dwayne an employee or is he a volunteer?
Volunteer in the Parks and Rec.
Volunteer.
Yes. He just came on the board about 2 months ago.
I didn't see any hours listed in this. Are we not putting the hours in or?
So it is meant to be at about a 15-hour week average. So that the reason we know that there might be some fluctuation, and that's something we'll work with. So if there's a program going on and they do 22 hours one week, but then the next week they only do 10, it's kind of that salary. We'd like them to try to be around that 15-hour a week range. But again, know that there's some fluctuation, and it's part-time too. So if they go on vacation and they don't work 1 week, but then they pick up that slack the week after, then they're still gonna get that wage.
Did we set that wage?
It would be the combined amounts of, so it's the 13,000. I better double check before I tell you wrong. No, we did set that wage. I think it's 13,200. So that took the wages that Eric is currently being paid and the wages Heather was being paid. They might have been an even 13, now that I say that.
We have a recommended motion. I would like to do that.
I would make a motion to approve the restructure. Which one, right? Yes, the restructure, including eliminating the current coordinator position and creating a program coordinator as described in the job description and posting the job internally and externally.
I support.
Moved and supported to approve the restructuring, including eliminating the current coordinator position and creating a program coordinator as described in the job description and posting the job internally, externally. Any other comments or questions? If not, you can call the roll, Lisa.
Tim,
No,
James,
No.
Barb,
Yes.
Gwen,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes. The motion carried.
The motion fails.
Failed.
It has to be a simple majority of council, so it would require 4 council, since there's, and with 2 absent, it's weird. So it's a majority in attendance, but it would have to be 4 to pass.
Okay.
Sorry.
So this topic is still open for discussion, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
If you so choose, otherwise it would die at this point and
Yeah.
have to come up later.
Yeah, I would like to see us act on it tonight. I don't know, I just struggle, I struggle with,
Understand.
yeah, that's it.
How I look at it was this, because I think this is,
I've been in those situations where you're kind of maxed out. And you know, Eric has had complaints against prior administrators about getting traction with what he wants to do and getting direction. It's just been since Darwin, really, that we've somewhat organized and formalized Parks and Rec. And they've now come to us with what their goals are. And it's a bit more of a formal process of our understanding how to support Parks and Rec. So I think if you kind of had that dialogue earlier on, production from Eric would be, you know, it could have increased year after year after year. I really think he's a great fit for the job, especially with his current job, full-time job. He has the extra hours to dedicate, and he has the hours in the afternoon to dedicate to the pool this season right away. So that's another thing. He's got managerial experience. He understands how to work with young kids. He understands athletes. Two big check boxes for me. So I just.
So are you saying just promote him to this without?
I'm saying post it internally.
Yeah, we have to post it. It can be internal.
Yeah.
But we should not be just appointing somebody. It
I
is,
just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page there.
Yeah, no, and if another qualified candidate internally was to apply, absolutely go through the process of the interview, but for someone that's put in a lot of hours to build programs and extra hours unpaid, and not had much direction, I think a little small town, IOU can get cashed in here.
and I can just say this, again, I like Eric very much. This happened prior to you being on the board. This happened prior to you being on the board. So when I first came on the board, Eric came to council. He had worked with Jim Wanacott on a presentation regarding becoming a full-time Parks and Rec director. And I know that that's been a goal of Eric's. I think we all know that has been a goal of Eric's for a long while. Eric and I talk about that from a personal level. I don't think the village of Blissfield can afford a full-time Parks and Rec person with benefits, et cetera. So we've talked about that. But he worked with Jim and he came up with a presentation. So that presentation was approximately 3 years ago. I've suggested that he share that presentation with this board again. Have you seen that presentation? Have you seen that presentation? That's good. But I do know that, and I didn't realize, I just assumed you had not. I know that I assumed, Tim, you had not, because you and I had talked a little bit about this. And I tried to encourage Eric to continue to show us the programs that he would like to, implement. One of the things we talked about at the Parks and Rec meeting recently is the pickleball. And we're talking about these things. Dwayne has another activity that he came up with, which is a basketball team. Again, a volunteer, and he's been doing some research on that as well. Dwayne, which is one of the activities Eric had suggested 3 years ago. The other one is the volleyball. Another one is now street hockey. And Dwayne has offered to run this program, looking into it. And that is something that we talked about for a fall sport, which, is that correct, Danielle?
Yes.
So this again is another activity that particular activity of the street hockey stuff was, I don't believe, part of Eric's plans 3 years ago, but it's something that's being looked at, being implemented for this fall. So that's where I'm going, that again, it's a volunteer that's again making these suggestions.
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful thing. That's what Parks and Recs is supposed to be, in my opinion.
Right, and well, and the question is, do you want to formalize that? Or do you want to continue relying on volunteer effort?
Why?
So volunteer effort at some point checks out.
Mhm.
And without, and that's why a formal position, that's why we all see the need to create a formal position.
But I've seen a person that has talked about wanting to formalize this position, but not doing as much as what I believe he could have done.
At some point, though, you can only dedicate so much additional time.
There was a year of COVID, a check was cashed, and there was no work done.
Well, I can't defend that.
I don't like what I'm having to say either. I don't relish this. But those are some facts I just wanted to share, so that everybody on the board knows those facts.
Can we make a new motion?
Anybody can make a new motion.
Make a motion to approve the restructure, including eliminating the current coordinator position and creating a program coordinator as described in the job description, posting the job internally, period.
Support.
Move to approve the restructure, including eliminating current coordinating position and creating a program coordinator as described in the job description and posting the job internally. Any other comments or questions? You can call the roll.
I have one comment. I think if we post it internally, we're gonna have one applicant. I mean, everybody knows that. Everybody on staff is happy where they are. So we know going into it that we're only gonna have one applicant. Just saying.
You can call
Well,
it.
and keep in mind, this is what's the review? Annual? What's the contract term?
Initial is 6 months and then annual on their anniversary
Right.
thereafter.
Right, so we're essentially saying you have a 6-month tryout. And then from there, it'll be a 6-month review or an annual review. Right? So can we extend 6 months to Eric? That's a question I'm asking. And if we come back in 6 months and we realize that it's not working out, then we move in a different direction.
So I stand by my recommendation. However, I do also think that we cannot continue doing the same thing that we are. It is not working. So to me, it would be a compromise posting internally. Again, I'm not changing my recommendation, but we do need some sort of movement if we want Parks and Rec to be successful. And I don't want to see us to continue to prolong these things, pushing that out further and further, because I mean, we can only do what we can within the time we have in a day. So I will make that comment too, but
Another comment. If Eric were to apply and get it, then he is increasing his hours that he works. So we're gonna put him in Heather's position where she was overworked, you know, and doing 60 to 70 hours a week. I mean, we're asking, if Eric gets the job, we're asking him to do
Not
55 hours a week.
right, but not the, I think the DDA was 55 hours a week. I think DDA was taking up,
Of Heather's time, you're saying.
Yes.
which it should have been.
Right,
this is no DDA,
Right.
no
This is- right.
events for DDA, nothing.
Right.
That would be,
no, I'm just saying that Heather did that for the village. Okay, are we
I
asking
think
Eric to do
Heather,
the
I
same
think
thing?
Heather was putting in additional hours.
but she's
For the
saying,
DDA.
she's saying Eric works a 40-hour
Sure.
job plus a 15, now he's at 55 hours a week, which is the total that Heather, is that what?
Yeah, and Heather was doing 40 and then she said she'd do more, so she was doing 55 to 60 hours a
Well, I
week.
think the last meeting we had, Heather was closer between 60 and 70 hours a week,
Right,
right? So I think
all I'm saying, do we want another employee to do that? Do we want to burn out another person?
well, no, I don't want burnout. I don't want employee burnout, but if it's your goal to make it a permanent position, we have to, yeah, I don't know, yeah, I want to give him the opportunity. I want to see if he will excel within the time frame we construct for him. And with the 15 to 20 hours a week, plus his full-time job.
If doesn't state it, could it state for 6 months?
That is within our personnel policy, that it's already an
So we don't have
adopted.
to state that in.
Whoever you appoint to this new position will be reviewed at 6 months' time.
And you will be that person that does the reviewing.
Correct, I will be.
If that person were to not do the job appropriately between now and that 6 months, what options could happen?
Well, let's think about the timeline, 6 months from now, all right? We will have gone through the soccer season, summer and fall soccer seasons, football and cheerleading, plus the pool. And at which point, sometime in November, we'll be looking at winter activities, which is indoor volleyball, indoor hockey, floorball, whatever you want to call it. Whatever other winter programming he's come up with. So we will have one full summer, spring, summer, fall, and then a future projection on winter. That's when we'll make our decision.
So, and you do still have a couple options. One, whoever successfully passes their 6-month probationary period, they're taken off, they move forward, they've got the job. That doesn't mean they have the job, but they still have annual evaluations and still have expectations. So that's option one. Option two, they don't meet the 6-month probationary period, and at that point, the village can say this isn't working out for either party and they separate. Option three, they could potentially get an extension of that probationary period up to no more than 6 months, so up to a year. So if at 6 months we say, yeah, we've seen some progress, we've seen some shortfalls, we're kind of in the middle, we're gonna extend this and give you an additional, and it doesn't have to be 6 months, it could be 3 months. It just can't exceed that 6 months. We could say, we're giving you X amount of time to meet these what we are feeling is shortfalls. And then reevaluate at that time as well. So you do have 3 options.
So that's with the motion on the floor of the internal candidate. It's been seconded, and so now we're ready to vote per se. Is that where we are right now?
Yeah, and if you guys, if you're done with discussion, you can just decide to roll, or somebody can say that they call for the question, which would be discussion's over and the vote needs to be taken.
Let's vote.
You can call the roll, Lisa.
Gwen,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Bob,
No. Does that motion carry?
Barb, you said yes? Thank you, it was very quiet, so yes, that
Okay,
motion did.
motion carried. Moving on. We're moving to item number 2, revised resolution for Michigan DNR Grant Rotary Trail Project.
I'll make a motion to move the approved amended resolution as presented.
Second.
Move to approve the amended resolution as presented. Any comments or questions?
It just for the public, it's the same resolution. I did color the changes. The DNR did respond back requesting that we clarify in the resolution the amount and the matching funds from Rotary. In addition to some other things. So I wanted to formalize that so that they know you guys did approve that.
You can call the roll, Lisa.
James,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Gwen,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes, that motion carried. New business, number 1, award life-saving awards to Lieutenant Jacob Wagner. Chief, you want to comment on that?
Back in December, Lieutenant Wagner actually responded to the same location 2 days in a row and discovered 2 separate victims that were lifeless and unresponsive due to narcotics ingestion, suspected heroin. Both instances, he was able to revive the patient using the Narcan that we carry in the patrol vehicles. Both victims were successfully resuscitated and transported for medical treatment. My understanding is they both recovered.
I move to award Lieutenant Jacob Wagner the Blissfield Police Department Life-Saving Award with 2 bronze clusters for the lives saved on December 7th and December 8th, 2021.
Support.
Moved and supported to award Lieutenant Jacob Wagner the Blissfield Police Department Life-Saving Award with 2 bronze clusters for the lives saved on December 7th and December 8th, 2021. Okay, call the roll, Lisa.
Barb,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Gwen,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes. Item number 2, award life-saving award to Officer Thomas Anton. Go ahead. Cover that one as well.
This happened just a couple weeks ago, very similar situation as to Lieutenant Wagner. Another suspected heroin overdose, and again, with the use of Narcan, he was able to revive the patient. It started off, the victim and his girlfriend pulled into the parking lot here. She came in looking for assistance. When Officer Anton got out there, he was able to initially get the person awake. As he had found out the person was wanted on several felony warrants. and was in the process of taking this person into custody when the person suddenly collapsed on him and went lifeless. There was initially a pulse that was very, very rapid and faint. Officer Anton, due to his extensive experience in narcotics, suspected it was narcotics overdose, and he retrieved the Narcan and got the patient revived. He did survive and was eventually taken into custody, but that was from the hospital by a different agency.
I move to award Officer Thomas Anton the Blissfield Police Department Life Saving Award for the life he saved on April 12th, 2022.
Support. Moved and supported to award Officer Thomas Anton the Blissfield Police Department Life Saving Award for the life he saved on April 12th, 2022.
My only comment is how sad it is that our village has those type of incidents happening, but how wonderful it is officers are prepared and we have the material here to do it with.
Yeah, it's just part of the national trend, unfortunately. I will tell you this with the location involved with Lieutenant Wagner. I was able to reach out to the person that owned the property, and with their assistance, we were able to get the residents there evicted, and they're no longer in town. So we resolved that neighborhood issue pretty quickly, so I was pretty happy about that. But yeah, unfortunately, we're not immune. We do pretty well statistically, but these things seem to happen in spurts. The last time we had a major spurt, we actually had 2 fatalities. And that's when the fentanyl was going around pretty hot. But yeah, we're pretty fortunate that we have the equipment we have, and the officers do a great job with it.
Do all towns have the Narcan now? My assumption is
No.
they do, they don't,
Not everybody. We're fortunate. Lenawee County Health Department does provide us with the Narcan.
or Narcan?
We also have the AEDs in our vehicles, which we've
Right.
used a number of times. In addition to that, we're now using, they call BVMs, ball valve mask, where you give air to the patient. We used to have a smaller device. Unfortunately, that put the officer's mouth in close proximity to the victim, and we did have an incident where an officer was contaminated. So we did evolve to the use of BVM, and the Blissfield Fire Department and Madison Fire Department are awesome in assisting us with the training of all the agencies in Lenawee and other agencies I know of. I think we're better equipped than any of them as far as the medical gear that we're carrying and using. So we do have an extensive amount of medical gear, and the officers are trained, and it's proving very valuable in the number of lives we saved. With Lieutenant Wagner, for instance, this will be his second and third life-saving award. So at one point, a few years ago, everybody in the department had a life-saving award. A lot of that was from the AEDs. So we went from the AED spurts down to the Narcan. I'm very glad we've got the equipment and we're able to save the lives that we do. So I appreciate your support and issuing the awards. Thank you.
How do they get awarded? And when do they get awarded?
Well, that's a good question. The actual medals cost about almost $300 a piece. I do have a benefactor that will buy those for us. They are unique. They do have the Blissfield logo on there. So it's gonna take a little time to get the actual medal made. Lieutenant Wagner's always got his. So what we do is he attached the clusters, an additional cluster for each additional life saved. So he's got the medal, now he's got 2 clusters that signifies 3 lives. If he continues on, 5 bronze clusters turn into a silver cluster. So that it goes on that way, and we go from 5 silvers to a gold cluster. So the more lives he saves, the more clusters he's gonna get on that ribbon of his. And they also have a ribbon that they can wear in their uniform. So once they get all that together, we're probably gonna have a little award ceremony somewhere. We used to do it at the stables. We don't have that option anymore. We were just having a discussion today. We're gonna try and reach out to the American Legion and see if we can do something there at some point. But yeah, I gotta get these medals made up, and it could take a few months. So,
Thank you for explaining.
thanks. Thank you.
I have one question, if I can ask, and I don't know if I can, so tell me if it's not a good question. You said one residence and somebody was evicted, does that mean the 7th and the 8th were at the same residence?
This is the same location, 2 days in a row, 2 different victims, but it's the same house.
Same house, that's all I was asking.
Yeah, and I reached out to the homeowner who, I don't think he even lived in the state. But once I had a conversation with him, he was very receptive and immediately took action to resolve that issue for us, so.
You have a comment?
It's regarding Tom. I happened to be in the building next door when Tom and all of them pulled in that day. And I think that sometime the police department gets the bum rap. But I stood there and watched the entire thing. And I just want to say how professional Tom was. He was gentle, he was kind. He did try to talk to the gentleman. Of course, there was just screaming and hollering at that point. But I think it's an honor for Tom, but I think it's also an honor for our police department as a whole. Because everybody talks about how bad the cops are and everything. And I think that was just a very good example of professionalism shown by our police department in saving a life. Thank you.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you. You can call the roll.
Gwen,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes. The motion carried.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Action item 3, approve change order for FY 2020-21 annual audit.
Could I ask a question, Danielle?
Yes,
What happened that they didn't proceed? This was gonna be extra hours.
yes, so I was thinking Daniel was gonna hang out, I don't know if he's, so there was actually a total of an additional $19,500 in fees. They are only requesting $9,750. I say only, but that is half of it. So they have agreed to, or they do want to work with the village and understand that this is a huge increase. There's a few things that actually contributed to this. And they did put it in their breakout, but one of the big things is the chart of accounts conversion. We are required by the state of Michigan because they updated their chart of accounts to do that. BSNA is doing the actual conversion at no charge for the village. However, there's a lot of work that went into that, and Brandon and I did a majority of that, but that did require changes to our financial reports and a lot of different things that the auditors had to adjust from previous audits to this one because of that. There were a few accounts, it was accumulation, depreciation, and then some other ones that we really struggled to fit within the new chart of accounts that they assisted with. That was a huge one. The other one is was quite a bit more work related to the water and sewer funds because of the fee increases and because of the amount of work that we have done with our wastewater treatment plant and some different things that in the past they've not experienced that and within the village of Blissfield. And then we had and I had emailed council about this before. So our fund structure, we have a municipal street fund that is actually incorrectly, but the money's there, there's nothing right, but it's incorrectly charted within the funds. So that created some issues. So the personal property tax or PPT dollars that we get was put into the general fund, not in this last fiscal year, but not the one they audited, but the one prior. So then last fiscal year, we had to, as a village, do a catch up, which created additional PPT money to get that caught up into these funds. So that created some issues, and then we had to adjust that municipal street fund because the village used to put designated tax dollars in there, but now they put general fund, that tax dollars in general fund, and then appropriate a specific amount, so there was huge changes to that, which gets very confusing. I will go into more detail if you want, but there was a lot of additional work. And then I think just generally that we had 3 administrators that worked on this single 1-year budget. It started with Joe. Darwin came in there in the middle and did his thing, and then I came in at the end. So I think that also contributed, and we did do a lot of cleanup with just, most of it was small changes or things that had to be addressed, but those small things added up quickly. So this does stink, having to present this to you. I do appreciate them working with us, and I do understand where that additional cost came in this year.
You think this is a
I'm not saying I
one-off?
like it.
Is this a
but
one-off, you think, going forward?
Yes, I do. Yeah, we had such a weird year with so many things, but I do feel really confident that the changes and everything that has happened in this last year has set us up for success moving forward into the future. So it does stink now to pay this extra money, but I think we're really going to see the benefit moving forward.
I do appreciate them charging us half.
Yes, me too.
And it could help us save money in the future. It could make the audit be cheaper. It's not a good word, but.
Hopefully, although everything's going up, it seems like.
All right, we have a recommended motion.
I move to approve the change order for fiscal year 2020 and 2021 annual audit overages in the amount of $9,750.
Support.
Moved and supported to approve the change order for FY 2020-2021 annual audit overtures in the amount of $9,750. Call the roll, Lisa.
Tim,
Yes.
Gwen,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes, that motion carried.
I know.
Action item 4, ordinance amending Blissfield Code section 216.1305, number 9, surfacing, and 10, parking lot landscaping.
I'll make a motion to move to approve the ordinance amending the Blissfield Code section 216.1305, number 9, surfacing to allow for the use of the permeable asphalt, and number 10, parking lot landscaping to require certain percentages be landscaped and waive the reading of the ordinance.
Support.
And there's a motion and supported. Can you call the roll on that motion that's presented?
Barb,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Gwen,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes, that motion carried. Action item number 5, amending Blissfield Code section 216.1304, off-street parking requirements, collective provisions.
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance amending the Blissfield Code section 216.1304 off-street parking requirements to permit allowances in a reduction in required parking spaces if the parking area is shaded by more than one use, and waive the reading of the ordinance. Support.
Motion that was supported. Can you call the roll on that motion as presented?
James,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Gwen,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes, that motion carried. Action item 6, amending code section 216.1326, development requirement.
We're gonna make it a threesome, or a trio, excuse me, we don't have to say that. Move to approve the ordinance amending Blissfield Code section 216.1326, development requirements to require street trees for every 35 feet of right of way and waive the reading of the ordinance.
Support.
Motion and supported. Can you call the roll on that motion that's presented?
Tim,
Yes.
Gwen,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes, that motion carried. Action item 7, adopt memorial bench and tree policy.
I have a question on that. Is there recommendation to have all the benches be swing benches?
For donation purposes, yes. That does not mean that the village cannot purchase or do something else. But the intent is to create some uniformity. If I come forward and say I want to donate a bench, that we are eliminating 20 different styles with 20 different parts or maintenance pieces and components was the idea of that. And to kind of make everything cohesive within our parks.
I think also as well as parts where with the floods, okay, with these swings, they can obviously raise them up for the flooding, for the cursed seasonal. And they were talking about some of the maintenance when the other material is there with the water and things like that for a period of time.
Which benches would that be? Would they have wooden sides on them?
I don't know, that's why I think they're going with this, they were going with this particular bench because this would weather the seasons and the flooding versus having a regular bench per se.
Does the swing get removed at the end of the season?
So they get lifted up, like Gwen said.
Okay.
So we have some currently that are down, we've got, I think 1 on each side, maybe 2 on one. So each winter, what's that?
One on each side.
One on, okay. We just use the chains to pull them up. So then if the, any ice that comes through, any flooding goes right underneath them, the ice doesn't hit them and damage them. They look good. They have a concrete pad under them. So the donation pays for the labor, the bench itself. We actually already have a donation, the bench is in, so it'll be installed this spring.
I have a question. What about benches that aren't in the floodplain? Say they're in the other parks.
So again, that's where the thought was to bring some uniformity to that, the maintenance of it into our parks so that we didn't have kind of this hodgepodge of different benches.
Well, I don't know if it's always a hodgepodge, but say the trailer where the pool area gets put in someday. Do you want all swing benches over there? Because some of those are put in permanent. The thought was that it's already been drawn out for like seniors walking that path. I'm not sure they all want to sit on it. They just might want to sit on a bench and rest
You're saying along the path, is that what you said?
along the path.
Again,
The half-mile path at the pool, that
And
was
the pool portion.
That's
That
that's
doesn't-
exactly where I was going with
That
my
was what,
question.
2 years ago, that Pat Fiber wanted to donate $50,000 to that path?
But I was going with the benches in all the parks. I'd like to see some stationary benches in the parks that the seniors can use easier. To me, Grandma's gonna put her walker over here to the side and try and sit on this bench and it's gonna swing as she's sitting, and then she's gonna be on the ground.
That's your
You
sewer
want a bunch
bill.
of kids in them swings too?
What's that?
Even kids,
Well, yeah,
yeah.
but
so
my thought went to
we're
seniors
not
right away.
saying that the village is going solely to swing benches. We're saying donations of benches are solely swing benches. Because we are, for this policy, we're saying that we commit to X amount of years for maintenance. So we want those to be like, if we as a village choose to put stationary benches along the walking path, this policy does not prohibit that. It also simplifies the policy so that if I come and I want to donate a bench, I don't have this slew of different requirements and different prices associated. I can say, okay, I want a swing bench, here's my funding. Not that they even have to do a bench. I mean, they can come and say, we want to make a donation or we want whatever still, but this just gives them some guidelines to refer to for trees and benches.
But if I want to donate a bench, it has to be a swing bench.
That's what she's saying.
Yes.
Well, just for the record, the bench out of the pool that was donated matches the benches over at Rotary Park.
Yes,
So there was,
so it's not a big
Thought given
conflict of
to-
different styles.
right, there was thought as to which bench.
I had
style.
5 benches set up to be installed already 2 years ago around that half-mile walking path. And those have been put on hold since the path has been put on hold. I would like to see that process. Right now, you got a pool out in the middle of grass.
Hold on, we're getting off topic.
We are getting off.
Yeah, it's not-
I appreciate that.
Does this
Yeah.
lock us into a price point?
So if there were increases in the fees for these things, we would have to adjust the policy, but that does, currently the policy covers for all costs. And a little bit of wiggle room for like inflation or things like that.
Okay. So one can't donate for a stationary event, is that what you're saying?
That's what she's saying.
All right,
And the idea behind, I think initially,
Go ahead, explain it if you can.
if I can, I believe the idea was to go ahead and have the swing benches, in my opinion, more so down at the river is what I was thinking as well. Now, I could be wrong with that, just coming new on the Parks and Rec board. But I think that there, I can state this, that we're talking right now about policies, donations, and things like that. Do I think that where there's room for some growth perhaps with some of the benches? Yes. But at this particular time, how should I say, there was no policy before. This gets things moving with a policy. And do I think this is all a done policy? No, I don't. But I do think that at this time, this is where we're going. There's room for growth with the, in my opinion, for the stationary benches, yes. But right now, since there was nothing going on, and there are the 2 benches that are down in the park, one on each side of the river, that this was a place to start. That's how I'm looking at this. And this is what was determined. And as Danielle states, this is all that is included with the $2,200 and how it would remain in place for 10 years. Okay, and then if of course, there's the tree options as well. But is there room for growth for the donation program? Yes, we know that, we've recognized that, and we're beginning to work on that as we speak. Does
And
that
that's
answer
not
that?
that the village won't work with somebody who has a stationary bench. This is intended for the person that just wants to make a donation in memory of somebody, and it's not tied to a specific project. It's not something that, you know, like if we build a trail, it's gonna be associated with that. If we develop and grow the pool or aquatic center, it'll be tied to that. So this is just that person that's, I wanna do something not associated with some other program. We're never, I don't think, I feel like I will never turn away a donation. If somebody's like, well, I really want a stationary bench, I'm not gonna be like, well, the policy says we're not doing that. You know, we would want to work with them. This just gives them that option if they don't know.
Now, the motion is also recommended by Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. I like to usually go with what an advisory board does. That's just my opinion.
I'm not against the swing benches. I just don't want to see every bench we put in be a swing bench.
I'm gonna make a note of that. When we have our meeting, we'll certainly be discussing that, how
You know,
to look at the
just so we
stationary.
are going to make stationary benches
Mhm,
available for donation.
mhm.
All right, then, we have a motion.
do we have a motion? We don't have.
Yeah, Lisa?
No.
Do we wanna, Glenn, do you wanna table this? Do you wanna?
Danielle, we have a family that wants to make this donation for this park bench now, is that correct?
Yeah, and I have several pending trees. So the policy is not written in stone. It's something that can change. I think the Parks and Recreation Board, one of the volunteer members actually drafted all of this, and they put a ton of time into this. They met, I think, 3 different meetings. So I think I would recommend that you approve this I will, or when both of us will take back the comments to them, and we can always revise and modify an existing
That's what I
policy,
was-
but that way, I just think it shows that we are moving forward and we do support these policies and procedures being in place, and then that allows the pending people who are kind of waiting to move
So
forward.
that way they can move forward and we can go ahead and tweak things.
So I move to adopt the memorial bench and tree policy as recommended by the Parks and Rec Advisory Board.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded to adopt the memorial bench and tree policy as recommended by the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. There aren't any other comments. You can call the roll, Lisa.
Barb,
Yes,
Tim,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Gwen,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes, the motion carried. On the number 8, action item, approved budget amendment, River Raisin Festival trash cleanup.
Before we start that discussion, yes, could I ask a couple questions?
Yes.
I think Eric made a really good point, a very valid point that I took to heart when he stated regarding the cost of the village of Blissfield does in part regarding the festival. And I don't know, Dale, if you would have an idea of approximate man hours or what was budgeted in the past for the police force to be, the team to be down there for the River Racing Festival. Because I know what you guys do work obviously pre-festival as well as the weekend of the festival.
So for probably the last 5 or 6 years, I've been able to absorb the cost into my budget with overtime.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've just absorbed it. We haven't, I mean, you see from the annual budgets, we stay within budget.
Right, right.
So we've just been able to manage that internally. We all know it's coming every year, so it's just kind of a given. We try our best to minimize overtime, so it really hasn't been that taxing. I
Okay,
think if anything, we end up with maybe 2 shifts of overtime.
okay,
But for the most part, yeah, we've maintained our staffing pretty well and worked around it. Very few pickups,
mhm,
so.
okay, thank you. And then the other comment that I was gonna make is that, Tim, I only say this because I know you've heard of the board.
If I may, I'm sorry.
Certainly,
The one thing that's really been helpful the last few years, the Festival Committee hired the Lenawee County Sheriff's Reserves to assist with the ingress points at the main gate as well as the parking lot behind the church here at Pearl Street. That has helped tremendously with my manpower as far as maintaining patrols in the village as well as internal patrol. That's allowed us to maintain a foot patrol within the park.
And that's paid through the
Festival Committee
festival.
paid for that, but
Gotcha.
that's been a huge force multiplier, and without that, it would have been a
That's
little more, it'd been a little more
Okay.
difficult, so.
Okay. And the other comment I was gonna make is last year, I know James was not a fan of this, but I really liked it. And I'm not saying that we cannot make donations, or, I can't use the word donation from the village, but for work being done. But we went ahead as council and we picked up the trash. And I just thought it was, I mean, it's picking up trash and it's not glamorous, but I did think it was a cool team building thing. I really did. I thought that was something that we, the village, could do for as being part of the team for the River Raisin Festival, because in the past, I don't know, I can't speak because I don't have all that crazy history, but it just like it made us a little part of the festival, and I did like that part of it. I don't want to say, no money to the Boy Scouts, that's not what I'm saying, I'm just also saying it was a nice thing for us to do. So I just wanted to say that before you spoke. Thank you.
And I don't have a ton to add because you guys probably know more than I do myself. I have spoke to the Boy Scouts who are willing to do the trash pickup this year. Again, the $2,500 is what they would be paid for those services. The village, I did reach out to Stevens. We do get 2 dumpsters for them to put this waste in. Stevens donated one, we paid for the other. So that's a cost of $250 per dumpster. So we saved $250. I know last year, one of the things that came up was getting additional insurance, or the Boy Scouts doing that. So I did reach out to legal and our insurance providers, so they are covered under our insurance, but they are not covered under workers' comp. So if one of the Boy Scouts that was volunteering trash pickup was injured, our workers' comp would not cover that. So I do want to make sure you know that.
Who would cover that?
They would have to cover that, either
Parent or the,
right, or if the Boy Scouts have some kind of coverage, and I don't know that. But this is coming to you guys. I have been trying to attend the River Raisin Committee Festival meetings. I did miss last week because of the DDA meeting. And our next one is May 5th. So I'll be attending that, you know what happens. And DPW does have a little bit of time into the festival as well. So they move some picnic tables around each year before the event. They bring down a pole for their like back screen drop that they do. And I mean, some general kind of maintenance and cleanup, which we should be doing anyway. And then they always go back down because if there's ruts from the vendors, if we have a lot of moisture, they make sure that, you know, things are picked up, their picnic tables are put back where they should be. I don't have an exact cost, and I think that probably varies a little bit year to year, depending on if it's wet down there or how many vendors and different things, so.
Where does that go in the budget?
There's a festival fund under the general fund of the budget that tracks those expenses.
so this budget is for zero. Looking towards having this discussion. In the time.
Correct, yes,
And it's been the $2,500 for the last couple of years you're stating as well.
correct, yes. With the, last year they did not do it.
Right.
But yes.
Is it for
Eric, I know you don't think this should cost us anything, but this is a fairly well-received attraction in the counties. In the village, surrounding counties. It's fairly well-run with a very small group of volunteers. And I look at this as, this is less than $1 per person in the village. It's a pretty small per person expense to have the Boy Scouts make some money and be able to do a lot of cool stuff. And then I don't have to pick up trash. So that's also part of my equation.
He absolutely hated it last.
I didn't hate it, but it wasn't that.
You were close, but you were close.
It was pretty gross. I will say that. It was really gross.
But when we got done, it was
Yeah,
extremely bad.
maybe after COVID and having a couple face masks available won't be so bad. But yeah, it was not pretty garbage that we picked up. It was fairly gross stuff.
Is there pretty garbage?
What's that?
Is there pretty garbage?
I think my garbage is pretty clean.
Is Troop 8 still around?
It is.
I read in the paper that Girl Scouts are gonna do the flags this year.
Yeah,
Cool.
So we have a recommended
Troop
motion
8
on
is
that.
still here.
Yeah, let's go.
So I'm for it. I move to approve the resolution approving budget amendment number 2 for trash services at the River Raisin Festival in the amount of $2,500.
Support.
Moved and supported to approve the resolution approving budget amendment number 2 for trash services at the River Raisin Festival in the amount of $2,500. Any other comments?
I'm gonna volunteer either way. That's my comment.
That's great.
Boy Scouts will appreciate it.
Yeah, Boy Scouts.
I did receive a comment from the first meeting I attended from the festival committee that they loved seeing the involvement from council and having them there.
I'll be there.
Yeah, right.
Doing different things.
I'm sure they have other things that are more pleasant to help with.
All right. Tim and I are signing up for the dunk tank.
You can call the roll, Lisa.
Gwen,
Yes.
Tim,
No.
Barb,
Yes,
James,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes, motion carried. Let the Boy Scouts know, Danielle.
Yes, I will.
Action item 9, approve wastewater treatment plant upgrade payment.
So we have one payment from the contractor and one from Pogemeyer. The total payment after retainage would be the 166,966.74. This project is moving forward. Last week, I think they had more employees than they have the whole time, so that's plus. But I will try to answer questions. I'm not sure that Pogemeyer is on tonight, so I do apologize. for
Denise
that.
is on
Denise
there.
is on.
Yeah, I'm on.
I didn't see you, sorry Denise,
That's okay.
but we will answer questions if you have them.
It's not an addition, no questions.
I move to approve contractors payout number 13 in the amount of $157,294.39. And engineers invoice in the amount of $9,672.45 for a total payment of $166,966.74 in connection with the Village of Blissfield wastewater treatment plant project upgrade, and authorize the village administrator to execute all documents related to this payment.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Can you call the roll on that motion as presented?
Tim,
Yes.
Barb,
yes,
Gwen,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes, that motion carried. Action item 10. Adopt the FY 2022-23 council goals and objectives.
I move to adopt the fiscal year 2022-23 council goals as presented.
Support.
Moved and supported to adopt the FY 2022-23 council goals and objectives. Any comments?
Yes, I thought it was a very good meeting last week. I really did. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed that we had a focus. And I enjoyed the camaraderie that was held by all of the trustees as well.
You call the roll, Lisa.
Gwen,
Yes.
Barb,
yes,
James,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes, that motion carried. Action item 11, approve missing persons policy. Do you want to talk about this, Chief?
Yeah, this is a revision of the existing policy we have, which is probably at least 15 or 20 years old. We did make it to our last lien audit last year. We did get a passing mark on this, but it was noted that we probably needed to revise it. It takes a lot of time to develop this because it does incorporate practices with the Lenawee County Sheriff's Department, because we utilize their dispatch center, obviously. So there's a lot of back and forth, making sure that whatever we decide here is consistent with the Sheriff's Department policy. Also, I sought input from, I call them the lien police, lien field services, who state police. They're the ones that conduct our lien audits. So I asked for their input and review of the policy as well. Got their blessing, and also lays a great foundation. We do have our next audit that we've been proactive on these things. So this policy is, we start off with a model policy that we get from the state, and then we obviously tweak it for our local jurisdiction, and this is what we came up with, so.
Motion to approve the missing persons policy revised May 2022 be adopted and implemented as current policy for the Blissfield Police Department.
Support.
Moved and supported to approve the missing persons policy revised May 2022 be adopted and implemented as a current policy for the Blissfield Police Department. You can call the roll, Lisa.
James,
Yes.
Gwen,
Yes.
Barb,
yes,
Tim,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes, that motion carried.
Thank you.
Action item number 12, payroll.
I move to approve the payroll register for March 2022 in the amount of $127,432.16.
Support.
Moved and supported to approve the payroll register for March 2022 in the amount of $127,432.16.
Only comment is, Lisa, thank you for taking the time to answer my questions. And then I obviously saw that with Danielle had obviously spoken about this, the change of some of the name changes of some of the topics.
Yeah.
For lack of better words, but so thank you for that clarification.
With that, any other comments? If not, you can call the roll.
Tim,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes,
Gwen,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes, that motion carried. Action item 13, accounts payable.
I move to approve accounts payable for the period of March 16, 2022 to April 22nd, 2022, in the amount of $1,021,798.82.
Support.
Moved and supported to approve the accounts payable for the period of March 16, 2022 to April 2022 in the amount of $1,021,798.82.
And you know what I mean, Lisa, about which accounts. I got ahead of myself.
Yeah.
I do that all the time.
I knew.
Okay.
Notice there's sometimes there's some questions on the bills, on our emails before we get here. So if you ever notice those, and if you guys have any other questions, we can ask Lisa.
And we appreciate those questions ahead of time because it's impossible to memorize every
Yeah.
transaction. So thank you for sending those ahead of time.
All right. You can call the roll, Lisa.
Gwen,
Yes.
Barb,
yes,
James,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes. Bills are paid. Report, administrator report. Is there any questions for Danielle? Okay,
Was there anything special, Danielle, you wanted to point out at all?
No, I don't have anything. I guess I'll be attending that River Raisin Watershed Council meeting tomorrow, so I'll let you guys know how that goes in my weekly summary.
thank you. Okay. Saw the water treatment plant council update. Council, any council discussion? Public comment, items not on the agenda. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Support. Support to adjourn the meeting. Call the roll, Lisa.
Barb,
Yes.
Gwen,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes. Motion